any emotions, characteristics that you feel successfully translated in your artwork here?
This was another one, kind of take on a classic Norse creature, the trolls. We knew early on we kind of wanted to do like variations, like we have a fire and an ice, a stone troll, and kind of trying to reflect that in this race. One thing I did like, again, is giving the layers to the character. So even in the first E3 trailer in 2016, he's coming at Kratos, and you can even hear him speaking. So you can tell they've got their background of their own languages, and so that even we don't understand, but it kind of adds to the character that way. One thing we did is we imagined like in this world, there'd be these kind of like monolithic structures that have power. And that's actually what the trolls are using as their weapons. So they've kind of picked those up in the world, so that kind of boosts their kind of natural elemental abilities and is like a core of how they attack.
It was a very unfortunate gameplay loss. There were some really cool ideas around those markers, that they would be present in the world and you would use them. And then if you saw one and it was still sort of there, solid, and no troll had appeared, like, oh, you're like, okay, and then you see another one, you sort of get comfortable, and all of a sudden a troll appears and snaps it off and uses it against you. I thought that was kind of neat, and we ended up not really being able to keep it in the scope of the game, but the using it as a weapon still, I think, made it unique for this character.
Well, I think you can even see little hints of that, because as you look at these pillars that they have, the offerings that we imagine people would put at them before they were picked up are still on there, and it's actually what the trolls used to hold them.
Yeah.
Even when you find them in the game, you can still see that their reaction's a little, like almost like a religion to the totem, so you see them praying to them, and that stuff always helps bring into the character. Also in the design, a lot of the stuff that when we can see them using on his shoulders, so you see energy almost taking over some of his skin, and the reaction to the weapon also on their body. I think it's something that we played on a lot on their designs. And you brought up them being more intelligent, and even on the costuming for these guys, we kind of went a little over on the handmade stuff, as they would make stuff for them and try to sell the scale with that stuff.
And each one was kind of like their own little hoarders, right? Like someone collects stones, others.
Oh yeah, and like skulls and stuff like that.
Yeah, each one had their own thing that they kind of hoarded.
Well, I like that fact that like trolls have their own culture, and that each sort of, I guess, race of trolls, the stone trolls, the ice trolls, and the fire trolls, like they truly had like villages. They had sort of a structured government. They had an alliance with the Aesir gods and sort of a peace with the Vanir gods. And then they were kind of screwed over by everybody, and they ended up wandering the world sort of stateless, right? That the last few that remained before they got double-crossed by the gods, like kind of wandered around in this sort of angry Ronin state.
What are discussions about how you guys came to the final designs of the dragons?
Yeah, this was another early design. I think we knew we wanted dragons. It was one thing we showed in the first E3 trailer. Here's some sketches by Steven, some pieces by Justin Sweet. And the idea was that this dragon lived in the mountains, so we were kind of pulling a lot from that. It's thinking like his skin is paler now that she hasn't been outside, and the idea that it's almost like a double mouth, and it can kind of inhale, and maybe it uses that for burrowing in the mountain, as well as being like a cool attack in the game. So we try to also make sure that the designs work with what we need for the gameplay mechanics.
Even the cave that you mentioned, that him living inside the cave, the wings was part of it, that like since he grew up in there, he kind of didn't develop the wings like the other dragons.
Yeah, just the way you look at real life, how certain animals start to kind of lose limbs and things that they aren't using and stuff, and the pigmentation kind of
This basically proves that it's really fucking hard to make a dragon that doesn't just look like every other dragon.
Yeah.
This took forever, and every time we were looking at it going like, okay, but it pretty much looks like you could just step off the pages of a Skyrim art book, right? And we, love that game, it's great, but we should make something that feels unique to our world. And that's super hard with dragons, because so many dragons have been drawn over the years.
Well, that's why I said, like, making that a design looks real isn't the metric for success here. I think we've been in a ton of meeting courts too, where you've been like, this looks great, but we need to still push it.
Right.
And that's like a blessing, but it also is hard work.
Focusing on the weapons, just overall, like what were some of kind of the core values or foundations that you guys were starting with in building these weapons?
Well, for me, it was the blades are such a part of Kratos. He's like the character, so making this new weapon, the axe, was a big deal. Trying to make something that could kind of carry that same weight. And at the first E3, I remember being at E3 with the team, and people responded really well to it, and that was kind of like a sigh of relief. I think it has some nice things. Again, this is one of the things we tried to bring, the Norse elements. I think Yefim did a first pass where he had like a skill tree across the axe, so you bring these elements, and then as it progresses, we kind of really push the visual drama on it to really kind of make it stand out. And I love at this studio that they're willing to let us explore things that are small as like an axe design or an arrow design, even something on the arrows, like how do we make this feel Norse? Maybe it's like braided down the stem or something. And I think it's an example of strong concept design if you can hold something up and say, hey, this works perfectly in God of War, but if you take it out, it doesn't work because all the things that we're pulling from are from the story and the world.
Yeah, and then axe itself was a big challenge just for the gameplay wise as well, like being able to customize it and change it and swap parts and all that. That was a big challenge as well. And make that in a way that it works with the design, because it was we also, like we mentioned with Kratos in the trails, like for the axe, we also had narrative behind it. There was a lot of cool little things that we could add on, like the ice trolls, influences. And if you look at the handle of the head of the axe, it has a lot of ice troll influences and design on the head of the axe, and that makes it that much more special instead of just doing like some Norse patterns. I think every time we try to bring the narrative into the designs, I think it helps solidify the idea.
Yeah, that's a part I think it's easy in games not to really get that narrative part. You know, it's easy to say, hey, we just need a brawler or like a ranged guy. And part of the history of the axe that Corey had was that ice troll, but it also had belonged to the mother. So you can see in the last upgrade of the axe, it almost has a falcon look to the tip of the blade, and then the bottom pommel of it as well. Like that's all inspired from the narrative stuff that Corey and the team gave us.
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't go too heavily into a lot of that stuff, but it's nice to have these influences there to know that everything has a sort of grounded purpose within the world. Like it's all being built, you know, from very sort of specific histories, as opposed to kind of just the random. I think you could really tell when you look at some games where it's just like everybody randomly throwing a bunch of stuff together in a pot, whereas something I think throughout all of God of War's history, you can kind of look at all of the art and really see that central concept that kind of breathes or sort of tendrils out to all these different aspects, and all of them feel like they're part of the same world, as opposed to the sort of randomized feel.
And I think audience these days are really smart. Like you said, they're dissecting this stuff and really picking up, and I think that layering they can really kind of tell.
And it's funny, this is like the weapons page, and we got Kratos' hands on here. He's like Chuck Norris, man. His
Those are the biggest
hands
weapons
are a weapon,
on the...
right? Or is this to show? Is that to show off the different scars he's got from the chains? Is that what the drawings were meant for?
Yeah, kind of. Obviously, the history, we don't have the blades, but we still want to make recall that they're still there. That's part of who he was. Yeah. Those scars will never go away. And then I think a big narrative thing too was he was trying to kind of keep that past.
But they also don't stop bleeding.
Yeah.
Like since he left Greece, they were sort of the wounds that never healed, right? And then throughout the game, he's kind of, like you said, hiding it, trying to sort of pretend his history didn't exist. But that never works out well for people.
Yeah, he can't get away, even though he's trying. It's still kind of part of him.
Everybody, thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you to Dark Horse. Thank you to our VizDev team. And thank you guys for listening to this whole commentary.
Thank you to our entire art team.
And our art team.
Yeah,
thank you to our entire art team. And
in production for working with us.
Yes,
and allowing us to endlessly
putting up
perfect.
with the craziness. Yeah. Honestly, it's thank you to every single person on this team and every significant other who has suffered through the insane schedule that we've had throughout all of this. We love you all, and we thank you. Hopefully, it shall be worth it.